It was late afternoon when I left campus. One of those days that stretches you thin and leaves you hollow. The kind of day where your head buzzes with unfinished projects, unanswered emails, and lectures that somehow felt heavier than usual. I'd spent most of it in the library, hunched over my laptop trying to finish a research paper I was already behind on. By the time I packed up and started the walk to the parking lot, the sun was already dipping low, spilling orange light between the buildings. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt. It had rained earlier, just a light drizzle, and the ground still glistened. The air smelled like wet pavement and autumn leaves, that particular scent that always made me feel nostalgic, even if I couldn't say why. I just wanted to go home, take a shower, eat something, sleep. But life doesn't always let you walk straight home. Sometimes it stops you mid-step and asks who you are when no one's watching. The road I took cut along the edge of a small canal. Not deep, just a narrow ditch where rainwater collected from the surrounding streets. It was half hidden by overgrown grass and old concrete pipes. I had walked that route 100 times before, always in a hurry, never really paying attention. That day, though, I heard something. At first I thought it was just the sound of water trickling. Then I heard it again, faint, high-pitched, broken. A cry. I stopped, looked around. The sound came from the canal. I stepped closer to the edge and peered down. That's when I saw them. Two tiny shapes pressed against the muddy wall, shivering violently. Their fur was gray, or maybe it was just the mud, and they were so small it almost didn't seem possible they were real. One of them was trying weakly to climb up the slope, slipping each time. The other just lay there, trembling, too tired to move. They were kittens, barely a few days old, maybe a week. My stomach turned. Someone had dumped them there. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, rain still dripping from the trees, watching these two tiny creatures fight for their lives. Then something inside me snapped, that quiet, furious disbelief that bubbles up when you see something cruel and senseless. How could anyone do this? I muttered, my voice shaking. They're just babies. I looked around for something to use, a stick, a piece of cloth, anything. I didn't want to scare them more, but the slope was slick with mud. Finally, I spotted an old metal grate lying nearby and used it to steady myself as I climbed down. The kittens froze when I got close, their cries turning sharper, desperate. The smaller one, the one who couldn't move much, was lying half in the water, its fur soaked. I reached out slowly, scooping them both up, feeling their tiny bodies tremble against my palms. They were cold, too cold. Shh, I whispered. You're okay now. I've got you. Their cries didn't stop. They were so weak, the sound barely more than a rasp. I didn't have a plan. All I had was my gym bag slung over my shoulder. I dropped to my knees, pulled out the towel I'd used that morning, and gently wrapped them inside it, one on each side like little bundles. They squirmed, still crying, their tiny mouths opening and closing like they were trying to call for their mother. That sound, I'll never forget it. I carried them to my car, towel and all, careful not to let them slip. I could feel the faint flutter of their hearts against my hands. They were alive, but just barely. The drive home felt longer than it ever had before. Every red light felt like an insult. I kept glancing down at the towel on the passenger seat, making sure it was still moving. Hang in there, I kept saying, like they could understand me. Just hang in there, okay? When I finally pulled up outside my apartment, I grabbed the bag and ran upstairs. My hands were shaking. I didn't even take my shoes off. I just went straight to the kitchen, laid the towel out on the counter, and started drying them carefully. Their fur came away in clumps of mud and leaves. I warmed some milk, the only thing I could think of, and poured it into a shallow dish. They were too small to drink on their own, so I dipped a piece of cloth in and let a few drops fall near their mouths. One of them started licking, weakly. The others stayed still. I didn't realize I was crying until I saw a tear fall onto the towel. It just broke something in me, seeing them like that. Two tiny lives someone decided didn't matter. That night, in that small apartment filled with the sound of kitten cries and city sirens outside, I made myself a quiet promise. If those kittens were going to fight for their lives, then so would I.
That first night felt endless. The kittens wouldn't stop crying. Their tiny voices were thin and fragile, echoing through the quiet of my apartment like something both heartbreaking and beautiful. I sat on the floor beside them, cross-legged, wrapped in a blanket, trying to figure out what I was doing. I'd never cared for animals before, not really. Growing up, we had a dog, but my parents did all the work. I didn't even know how old these kittens were or what they needed. All I knew was that they were small, helpless, and depending on me. Every few minutes, I'd lean in close to check that they were still breathing. Their bellies rose and fell so slowly it made me nervous. I remember Googling things on my phone. How to feed newborn kittens? What kind of milk can kittens drink? How to keep kittens warm without their mother? Each answer made me feel more desperate. I didn't have kitten formula. I didn't have bottles. I didn't even have a heating pad. But I had the towel, the warm water bottle, and determination. And somehow, that had to be enough. I gave them names that night. It felt strange to do it so early, but I needed to. It made them real. The one that kept moving, crying, trying to climb over the towel, I called her Luna. The other one, smaller, quieter, the one whose breathing scared me, I named Milo. Milo, Luna, I whispered, touching their tiny heads with the tip of my finger. You're safe now. I promise. They didn't understand, of course, but saying it out loud made it feel like a vow. I stayed up until sunrise. Every couple of hours, I'd warm more milk, soak the end of a paper towel in it, and let them lick the drops. Luna caught on fast, her little tongue flicking greedily, eyes still closed. Milo was slower. I had to nudge his mouth gently, whispering his name until he started swallowing. It felt like trying to keep a flame alive in the wind, fragile, trembling, beautiful. When they finally slept, curled up together on the towel, I just sat there and watched them. The city outside was beginning to wake. Car engines, voices, the faint hum of the world returning to motion. But inside, it was just us. I realized then how quiet my life had been before, how routine, how empty in ways I hadn't noticed until now. Over the next few days, I built my life around them. I bought kitten formula, a tiny feeding bottle, soft blankets. I skipped the gym, left the university early when I could, and set alarms through the night to feed them every few hours. It was exhausting, but it felt right. Luna got stronger first. Her eyes began to open, revealing two small blue marbles that blinked up at me with curiosity. She started exploring her box, wobbling on unsteady legs, meowing loudly when she wanted attention. Milo stayed fragile. He slept more, ate less. I told myself he just needed more time, that he was smaller, that he'd catch up. But deep down, I was afraid. One night, about a week after I found them, I woke up to silence. It was strange. I was used to their little sounds, the soft shuffling from their box beside my bed. I got up quickly, my heart pounding. Luna was awake, pressing herself against Milo, nudging him with her tiny head. But he wasn't moving. I froze. "Milo?" I whispered. I touched him gently. His body was limp, still warm, but wrong. I tried everything, rubbing him, warming him, begging him to breathe, but it was too late. When the realization hit, I felt something inside me collapse. I'd known it might happen. The vet I'd called for advice had warned me, Newborns that young without their mother often don't survive. But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. I buried Milo that morning, in a small patch of dirt behind the apartment building. I wrapped him in the towel I'd first carried him in. Luna cried for hours afterwards. I sat beside her box, hand resting gently inside, letting her tiny paw cling to my finger. "I know," I whispered, voice breaking. "I miss him too." That was the moment I realized love doesn't need years to grow. It can happen in days, in hours, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. I'd known Milo for less than a week, but losing him felt like losing something important, something pure. And maybe that's why I held on to Luna even tighter after that. Because sometimes the only thing you can do with pain is turn it into care. The days after Milo's death felt heavier. The apartment, once filled with soft sounds, the shuffling of tiny paws, the unsteady cries of two small lives, felt muted. Even Luna was quiet. She would sit in the corner of her box, staring at the space where Milo used to sleep. Sometimes she'd let out a small, searching mewl, as if still expecting an answer. It tore me apart every time. I started talking to her more. I didn't even realize I was doing it at first. I'd come home from class, drop my bag by the door and say, "Hey Luna, I'm home." Sometimes she'd blink at me, tilting her little head, like she was trying to understand. Other times she'd walk clumsily toward me, meowing softly until I picked her up. It amazed me how fast she grew. Within 2 weeks, her fur had fluffed up. Still that soft, smoky gray, but now it shimmered faintly in the sunlight that spilled through my window. Her eyes, once clouded blue, were turning a deeper green. She was alive, and every day she was stronger. Taking care of Luna gave my life structure again. My mornings weren't just about rushing to class anymore. They started with warming milk, checking her box, cleaning her tiny dish, and watching her pounce at invisible dust. She followed me around everywhere, the bathroom, the kitchen, even when I tried to study. She'd jump onto the table, flop across my notebook, and stare up at me like she owned the place. I'd laugh and say, "Okay, Luna, you win," and give up on studying for a while. It was strange how something so small could change everything. I still thought about Milo often. There were nights when I'd dream of finding them again, both of them crying in the rain, and I'd wake up with that same ache in my chest. But Luna reminded me that from loss, something can still bloom. She carried his memory with her. I felt it in the way she'd curl up beside my hand when she slept, the way she'd pause sometimes before eating, as if waiting for someone else to join her. Sometimes I wondered if she understood, not in words, but in feeling. Animals have a way of knowing things we can't explain. By the end of the month, Luna had turned into a whirlwind of energy. She'd race through the apartment like a little storm, up the couch, across the kitchen counter, sliding across the wooden floor. I had to kitten-proof everything after she managed to knock over a glass of water and almost my laptop. But watching her play made me feel lighter. It was like she was reminding me, and herself, that she'd survived. One night, after a long day of classes, I sat on the couch with her sleeping on my chest. The city outside hummed, cars, distant sirens, a subway rumble, and her tiny heartbeat pulsed against me, steady and calm. I thought about how random it all was. If I had left the university 5 minutes later, if I had taken another route home, if I hadn't heard their cries, Luna wouldn't be here, and I probably wouldn't be the same person I was before that day. People say it's just an animal, but it's not. It's a life, one that trusts you completely,
that depends on you, that teaches you what unconditional love looks like. I'd always thought compassion was about big things, saving lives, changing the world. But Luna taught me it starts with small choices, stopping to listen, reaching out, doing something when it's easier to walk away. She didn't just survive. She made me want to be someone better, someone more patient, more aware, more kind. Sometimes when she sleeps curled against my arm, I still whisper, "You made it, Luna." And maybe it's silly, but I swear she understands. Her tail flicks once, she sighs, and I feel that quiet, gentle warmth that tells me she's at peace.
A year can change a lot. The seasons turned over, and somehow, without realizing it, I had built a quiet rhythm around Luna's life. Or maybe she built one around mine. Either way, she wasn't that fragile, trembling kitten anymore. She'd grown into a beautiful gray cat, sleek and confident, with eyes that seemed to hold a kind of knowing. Every morning, she waited by the door, tail flicking, as if she knew my schedule better than I did. And every night, she'd curl up beside me when I got home, the same way she had that first week, except now she took up more of the couch than I did. She still had her mischievous streak. I'd find her batting pens off the table, hiding socks, or trying to steal bites of my breakfast. But there was something comforting in her chaos, a reminder that life had returned, that the quiet apartment that once felt so heavy with loss now pulsed with her curious energy. Sometimes, when I look at her, I think about that day by the canal. I can still see it so clearly. The rain-soaked street, the muddy water, the two tiny shapes fighting for warmth. It feels like another lifetime. I still think of Milo too. I don't think that will ever go away, and I don't want it to. His short life mattered, even if it lasted only a handful of days, because without him, I might never have stopped that afternoon. I might never have learned what it means to care beyond reason. There's a photo of the two of them, one I took on my phone that first week when they were sleeping together under the towel. I printed it and framed it. It sits on a small shelf near the window where Luna likes to nap in the sun. Sometimes she stares at it for a moment before curling up, like she remembers. A lot has changed for me too. Back then, I was just a tired student trying to survive each semester. But somewhere between bottle feedings, vet visits, and late nights spent listening to tiny purrs, something shifted. I started volunteering at an animal shelter on weekends, just cleaning, feeding, helping out where I could. It's not much, but it feels right. Every time I see a frightened animal begin to trust again, it reminds me of Luna, of how she looked at me that first night, unsure but willing to believe. I've learned that compassion doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes it hurts first. Sometimes it asks you to give more than you think you can. But it also gives back in ways nothing else can. Luna taught me that. She reminded me that love, the real kind, isn't always neat or planned. Sometimes it shows up in the mud, in the rain, crying for help when you least expect it. And if you choose to answer, if you reach down and hold on, it can change you forever. Now, when I come home from class, or from the shelter, or just from another ordinary day, Luna greets me at the door. She meows once, stretches, and brushes against my leg like she's saying, "You're home. We made it another day." And I smile every time, because we did. We made it together.